Hello everyone, and this is the second writing tip video that I'm doing. And like I say, for those of you who've just joined this, my name's Rob Turner. I write the online comic Reynard alongside a very talented group of artists and creative professionals. And basically what this is about is people I know have said like, oh, I want to write but I'm having XYZ problem, or I'm trying to do this and I don't know what to do. So these are going over various things that can help. So for example, in a previous video we talked about establishing a writing routine. Now this second one is about generating ideas. And I'm going to talk about generating ideas both by yourself and with a group, because I think both of these things can be important for different types of writing. So for example, we're going to start with doing it for yourself. So if you're writing by yourself, how you can come up with ideas. So, for example, when I used to do, and I still do this sometimes with the comics, I would sometimes, if I wanted to kind of get ideas down, I would sort of do TV guide style summaries of what I wanted to write. Because then it was quite simple. It was then, okay, if I was reading the TV guide, what would the episode summary be? And then from there, it then became easier, because then you could then sort of have a mental image of how the episode would go in your head, and you could start to take it from there. Now, not everyone does it that way. Like, some people like to plan it out and have cards and little lines going through things and all the rest of it. And if that is your process and that helps you, brilliant. I personally like to keep it simpler and kind of have a more straightforward kind of process as I do it. But there is no, again, like I said before, it's not as simple as kind of right or wrong. It's what process works for you. And like I said, we'll get to later about working with other people, because that's where it gets a bit more complicated. But then sometimes, of course, it's not that simple, and you may find yourself struggling to come up with an idea. And this is where having different exercises can help. So, for example, there is a few books that can help with this, like Natalie Goldberg's Writing Down the Bones is really good for that. There's some fantastic creative exercises in there, and there's various ones you can look up online. But like, for example, like a basic one, so let's say, for the sake of argument, let's say you wanted to make a animated sitcom about a badger. And so you get like your spider diagram, you put sitcom or badger in the middle there, and then you have these little lines going, what words do I associate with badgers and sitcoms? And then eventually you come up with the ideas. So it's like, you might say, like, slapstick, job, trapped in a location, you know, various things. And then like the badger thing, or they live underground, badger from Wind in the Willows, he's a bit grumpy. You know, they apparently, you know, carry diseases, you know, whatever it takes to kind of generate the idea. And from there you could start developing this. So you then start thinking, okay, so who are these characters in this sitcom? How do they interact with each other? And then over time you then start developing it, and you then think, oh, okay, we then sort of pace it out, because what do we do? So in the first episode, we're going to introduce these characters, and then sort of find out these kind of situations from there. And then, of course, another thing to look at, again, if you want to sort of judge the tone of something, is, you know, read books, watch TV, go see films, play video games, because I think having different things to look at can help. I mean, you know, and also real life as well. I think there's a common misconception with the idea of write what you know. So people use this phrase, and I think people mean that this means that the only stories you can come up with that are valid are ones that solely take place in a location you know and have lived in and have had life experience of. You can flip that round. You know, you can sort of extrapolate the what ifs. So I'm going to take an example for when I worked at a certain famous insurance company that is very prominent in Norwich, so people who knows this know who I'm talking about. And they had this vending machine, and the vending machine produced this really like neon orange, mutagen orange squash. Like, it looked horrific. Like, okay, we were getting free coffee and free drinks from it, but it was, it looked horrific. And I then started extrapolating from this, like, what if that stuff would be something that changed people into giant fruit? And then it kind of went from there. And then you started developing a character, like, who is this character that would do this, and what were their motivations, and it kind of went from there. And this is just it. A technically real life thing, but you can then use that as a springboard for something that you imagine. So I've had this for a couple of times, and like I said, I don't want to sort of out anyone, but there is sometimes, like, when you develop a character, you take kind of portions of different things. So there's an element of something that you watch, there's an element of a real person there's an element of a book you've read or a story you heard, and it's the combination and how they develop over time that sets them apart. Because yes, people could argue, oh, there's only so many plots, there's only so many ways to do things. That's true, but there is always a twist you could do on it, a variation that people don't see coming, and that the elements then come together to create something else. Now, that idea, like I say, there are various ways that you can do this to kind of generate ideas for yourself. And like I say, always kind of keep going. And like I say, if you hit a wall whilst you're writing something, so for example, if you're not sure of a character's motivation, imagine that you're interviewing them. And you don't necessarily have to write it down. You could sort of act it out. You could, like I say, you could record it, or you could sort of get a friend to sort of play the character. There's different ways you could do it. And again, there's not necessarily right or wrong, but it is a way of generating ideas. And yeah, don't be afraid to kind of ask for feedback from people. And you don't necessarily need to ask, like, someone who's another writer, And also as well, don't make assumptions about the feedback you get from people. So again, an example, one of the scripts I wrote, Subconscious, which was one of the comic issues, I gave the script to a friend of mine who I've known since infant school, and I expected her to talk about the characters. But in actual fact, what she told me in the feedback was, this is good, but it needs more action. So don't assume the advice you're going to get from people, and listen to what they have to say. I mean, you don't necessarily have to build on what people say. You don't always have to follow everything they tell you, but listen, and, sometimes people are right, and sometimes something gets developed that way. So that is kind of working with individuals. The next bit is working with groups. Now, this can be a bit trickier because, in effect, you have to kind of assign roles for each other. So going back to the whole, like, when I used to, like, work on sketches for the Comedy Society, and I was working with my friend Dan, who established the Comedy Society, and also Intellectual Hooligans Improv. And the way we used to do it, and I think it worked quite well, is that initially, like, as I say, we would kind of discuss the ideas, and work, and as I say, this happened when we worked with other people as well, is discuss the ideas, say, what about doing this thing, and then I would then sort of create a structure and then write it out to kind of get it on the page. And that worked quite well. So I think if, for example, you've got someone who's better at generating ideas, you let them generate ideas. If you've got someone who's better at writing, you let them write. And now, it might be different. You might find that you write something and then that person proofreads it and does a redraft, or you do a bit at a time. That's fine. My personal instinct is to try and keep it as simple as possible. So, everyone's got their strengths and weaknesses, and you have to kind of gauge what works best for you. And the best groups tend to be the ones where people play to their individual strengths. And I think you will probably, with a bit of trial and error, work out what works best for you. And as I say, this doesn't necessarily, that doesn't solely apply to sketches. We did that with a play as well, and it could work with anything if you want to collaborate with something. I mean, with the artists, for example, when I'm working on the comic, you do talk to them and sort of say, does this work, does that work? And there is an element of having to sort of sometimes pare things down that you've come up with, because they have to draw it. And yes, technically with a comic you can sort of come up with anything, but sometimes, and again, it's a balance. Sometimes artists want more description and they want more detail, whilst others kind of want a bit more freedom, and they kind of want you to kind of give them a starting point, but don't sort of hold their hand too much. And again, like with the sketch thing, it's trial and error. Find what works, and then that will kind of help you when it comes to sort of collaborating and generating ideas. And of course, the thing is, with generating ideas in a group, you do have to be a bit disciplined as well. I think it's easy to sort of get distracted by things, so if you can, find another room, find somewhere to go, and make sure people focus. Make sure it's like, you are trying to do these ideas, find the thing that works. I mean, like I say, with, for example, comedy sketches, simple ideas are often good. Like, so for example, parodies are often good because you have something to work with. So for example, I did a sketch where so you have the JML people, and JML speak like this, and of course the joke would be like, I talk like this all the time. I'm currently going through a midlife crisis. And then you take like something really dark, and then it's fun. Or like, for example, like the other joke I was like with like Bane from The Dark Knight. Like, he's got a very distinct voice, and like, what about him just doing something ordinary, like, yes, I'll have a package of Benson and Hedges, please. Yeah, and I'll go for the £2 scratch card. I'm feeling lucky today. Stuff like that is fun. But like I say, the main thing with generating ideas, be open. Try and read different things. Sometimes it's good to go outside the genre that you're writing in. Because sometimes you can add a blend of kind of different elements to something. And also as well, like, look beyond things that you normally do. So for example, if you really like horror films, but you mainly watch modern ones, watch an 80s slasher film, watch a Hammer horror, watch, German expressionism, try and extend, even in a sub-genre, you can usually extend beyond what you know, because nobody can watch everything. And likewise, again, using horror as an example, read some Victorian Gothic, read Goblin Market, read Wuthering Heights, extending a little bit beyond what you'd normally look at can give you other ideas to think about, other ways to sort of blend with what you've already got. So there is that. Also, if you can't have a notebook on you all the time, like if you've got a mobile phone, use like the text thing or memo or whatever's on there, or I mean, some of them, like, you could voice record, for example. And if you get an idea, get it down as soon as you can, because things go. I've done it. I think everyone's done it at some point, where you think you have a good idea and then you can't remember it. Or sometimes, you'll write something as like, if Charles Dickens were alive, he'd shit on your face, which I've no idea why I put that, but there it was. Yeah, I think basically, again, a bit like with the routine thing, being ready to write down ideas, being ready to sort of have something to hand if you think of something. And also, like I said, my advice as well is, and again, I think that's in the Natalie Goldberg book, it's like, buy some cheap, like, I'm just going to find this for you. So, these, you can get these at sort of a cheapy discount place. But you can get the equivalent anywhere. Get those cheap pens, because then you can just grab them, use them, and you don't have to think about them, you don't have to fiddle about with refills, you don't have to mess about. Keep it simple. And that's the thing, with ideas, be open. And also as well, the other thing I will say, ideas sometimes will work in one thing but won't work in another. So even if you sort of write something and you find it isn't working, and like I said, if you find yourself, really tried everything, you've tried all these exercises and it still doesn't work, don't worry. Because those ideas, this process you're going through, the chances are it will emerge in something else. And an element of that thing you did before will come up somewhere else. So try, like I said, I know it's difficult because if you've worked really hard on something that doesn't come through, I've done it, I think everyone's done it, it's frustrating, but don't give up, keep trying. And I think, again, with any creative process, that is the hard thing, keeping going. But because, like I say, even if you're working a full-time job, even if you're, looking after kids and everything, real life is hard, and real life makes what you're trying to do difficult. I get that, I think everyone gets that. But even a little bit of progress a day is still progress. So, be open to your ideas, don't give up on them, keep trying, and like I say, with a collaborative effort, try and make sure everyone knows what they're doing, and also, as if you can with a collaborative thing, try and set deadlines, because that does help focus as well. Which, again, not always easy, like I say, because, we all have lives, and I get that. But anyway, I think that covers what I want to talk about this week. Again, I will include the link in a blog I'm going to be writing at the same time. And as I say, if you've got any questions, if you want to know more about creative writing, if you feel there's something I haven't covered or you've got something that works, by all means comment below and we'll follow up. And before we go, still time to enter our original character contest. So if you want something to do to help you generate ideas, come up with a Reynard City character. You don't necessarily have to draw it if you can't. Let's say if you can't draw, that's harsh. But if you just want to sort of describe the character, you could do that. And again, we will include the link in the blog. As I say, there will be a link to the blog in this video, so that will be there. And also, if you've seen the comic and you like it, or you like these tips and you want to support us, we do have Patreon as well. We also have Ko-fi and PayPal and sponsorship as well, which, like I say, are all going to be down there. And because, like I say, this is what keeps things going and supports creative people that are working on this project and have worked really hard. I think this is the thing. I think this is something that it has to be emphasised. This isn't just me. There's a whole group of people that have worked really hard and deserve that support. Anyway, thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have an awesome day, and I'll see you again soon with more creative tips. Bye!